We've got developments in two recent cases that have received a lot of attention in the media. I'll start with the first one that we're focusing on, which is an arrest in the case of a double homicide in Fort Washington. This, you may recall, happened on August 4th. This is a case involving a 56-year-old Patricia Mercer Harris and her son, Frank Lamar Harris. Homicide investigators have been working diligently on this case for several weeks now, and they now have arrested 34-year-old Quindell Mercer. He is the son of Mrs. Mercer Harris and the half-brother of Frank Harris. Police are still working to establish a motive in this case. They have received tips from the community, and they want the community to continue to reach out. Those sorts of bits of information are invaluable to the police department, and if anyone has any information, they can give Crime Solvers a call, remain anonymous, and those tips are always welcome, always useful, and you can remain anonymous when you give those tips. One of the tips that helped lead investigators to Mr. Mercer led them to a vacant apartment in District Heights. When officers went in, they discovered Mr. Mercer in that apartment, and he was seen dropping a book bag out the back of that apartment. Inside that book bag were weapons to include the murder weapon in the case of that double homicide in Fort Washington. Additionally, we are announcing that the person who had been named a person of interest in the case of a toddler who was shot in the town of Glenarden has now been named a suspect in this case. Police are looking for 18-year-old Devin Angel Matos. They have been, again, working this case diligently, and through information that they've uncovered during the investigation and from tips from the community, they have now named Mr. Matos as a suspect in this case. In the case of Mr. Matos, and that child who was a few weeks shy of his second birthday, police are now issuing up to a $25,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction in this case. Take any questions you have?
On the first case, Julie, with Mercer, can you talk a little bit more about what you said a tip led police to an apartment? Was he living there, or what? He was vacant? I don't understand what he was doing there.
The tip came in that Mr. Mercer was in an apartment in the 6600 block of District Heights Parkway in District Heights. When investigators got to the scene, the apartment was empty. Mr. Mercer was inside.
And the weapon that's being linked to the murder, talk a little bit more about that, please.
The murder weapon was discovered in that book bag containing other weapons that Mr. Mercer threw outside his apartment window. Police were able to, through our firearms examination unit, determine that that gun ballistically matched the gun used in the double homicide. And then if you are interested, I've just got a couple of little tidbits from the police department in terms of the earthquake itself. We were all at headquarters in Palmer Park, and there was no question an earthquake had hit. It felt like it lasted for about 30 seconds. The building was swaying. Some people ran into door jams, some people ran outside. We had no injuries reported, and within about 20 minutes after the earthquake hit, we held a conference call with all the command staff, in which Colonel Davis reached out to the district commanders and various heads of departments to find out what was happening where they were. Were there any injuries? Were there any reports of structural damage? And what we've learned is that there were a case of 2 minor injuries reported, and they are working a high-rise in Oxon Hill where there may have been some structural damage to one of those buildings. On that conference call, all of the folks who work dayside were told to stay longer, do some overtime so that there was overlap, just so that we had a lot of coverage. And what the police officers will do in the various districts is go to all of the critical infrastructure, to drive by the schools, drive by hospitals, make sure that everything is safe, and from what they can tell, just a visual inspection, everyone's okay and that the buildings are okay.
Do you have a more specific location on the high-rise in Oxon Hill, please?
Not sure that we do. We can get it to you. Anything else about either case?
That you believe the next 18-year-old was involved.
I'm sorry?
The 1-year-old child, the arrest warrant, but
I can't hear your question.
the 18-year, the baby that was shot, the arrest warrant, what led you to believe he was involved?
Through the course of the investigation and some community tips, they pointed to Mr. Matos as a suspect in that case. All good?
Or any other people involved in the toddler?
In the case of the toddler who was shot, they are continuing. That's a very open, active investigation. They are working to determine who else may have been involved.
And Julie, the father was never a suspect, and this Mercer is the only one that you guys believe was totally involved in this.
Correct. Quindell Mercer is the only suspect in the case of the double homicide.
And you said there's police are still working to establish a motive. Was he living there at the time, or was he just?
Quindell Mercer was not living at the home, and they are still working to figure out what the motive in that case was, and that's something that they'd like to hear from the community. If anyone knows anything about Mr. Mercer, he may have told them something, they would like to hear from him or them.